Greetings, programs. I'm RJ's Day, and welcome to Fanfiction. In this web show, I analyze video games, movies, and TV shows that I really like, but there's something about it that really bothers me. I'll try to explain these things in a way that makes sense to me and others, using only facts and evidence that are in the universe of the game, TV show, or movie. Because, fans will find a way. Today we'll be going over Star Wars The Last Jedi, the Holdo Maneuver. Now, of course, I had a lot of issues with The Last Jedi, but one of the biggest issues I had was the Holdo Maneuver. It doesn't make sense. The reason why this bothers me so much is it seems to make the other previous Star Wars movies completely useless. If all they had to do to get rid of the Death Star or any other large ship was to fly a smaller ship directly through it and destroy it, then they didn't have to waste their time with any sort of awesome maneuvers while running through trenches or anything like that, shooting torpedoes at the main reactors and destroying it. All those lives lost during the final Battle of Endor really didn't matter either, because all they had to do was take a Mon Calamari cruiser or even a transport and fly it directly through in hyperspeed. To figure out why they haven't used this maneuver in the past, I was only able to look through the canon material that is in the universe now, which means the movies, some of the video games, and TV shows. So the bottom line here is if this worked on this First Order ship, why wouldn't it have worked on the Death Star in the original movies? I believe the answer actually lies in Star Trek knowledge. If you know anything about Star Trek, you know that most ships have shields. Any ships that go faster than the speed of light actually have to have what's called deflector shields. Deflector shields are energy shields that keep particles from ripping through the ship when they're going at or above the speed of light. Without these, the ship would be completely torn apart by the smallest particle in space. Knowing this, I assumed that there's a similar type of technology in the ray shields or energy shields on the capital ships in Star Wars. The last times we actually saw someone go to hyperspace and it resulted in an exploded ship, I'm going to use the reference from Rogue One. This actually had a transport ship that went to hyperspace the second an Imperial Star Destroyer came out of hyperspace. When the two collided, the smaller transport was destroyed, while it looked like the Star Destroyer was completely unscathed. So why didn't that transport rip through this Star Destroyer just like the Raddus ripped through the First Order carrier? My answer is shields. Now you could say that I'm grasping at straws here to try to make something that doesn't make sense in this new movie work, and yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. But I'm a big enough Star Wars fan to try to make this movie make sense, because it doesn't look like it's going to go away. So I'm going to try to make it make sense as much as possible so that the rest of the series will make sense to me. The transport ship used by the Rebels obviously has weaker shields than the Star Destroyer. What I believe is that the Raddus actually was the first real warship we saw fighting against an Imperial force. The Rebels never actually had real capital ships. They had ships that were retrofitted to become capital ships for combat. Therefore, their shields were never that high grade, and never close in comparison to the Imperial Star Destroyers. The Resistance ship, the Raddus, being a true military carrier and the pride of the Resistance fleet, has actually very strong shields. Possibly shields that rival that of the First Order. I would assume that those that previously served in the Rebellion would understand the value of very strong shields, as every time they would have lost a ship, it would have been a devastating blow since they didn't have very many. This is different than the transport in Rogue One, which obviously had weaker shields than the Star Destroyer that it ran into. The shields would actually act like a bumper that would slow down objects that were coming in contact with the ship. This would explain some comments about collisions that we see in the Star Wars universe. Star Wars A New Hope, Han talks about colliding into a star or supernova. We also have Hondo in Rebels that talks about colliding with other ships. These don't seem to be catastrophic collisions, and they don't result in some sort of massive explosion that deatomizes everything in the area in a quick flash. Now let's assume that no Rebel ship had shields that rivaled the Death Star. This would mean that if they jumped to hyperspace and tried to collide with the Death Star, all they would do was explode against the shields of the Death Star. For the explanation about the shields does seem to make the collision of the Holdo maneuver make sense. If the two shields collided with each other, two ships of similar strength of shields would then result in damage in both ships. If one ship had stronger shields than the other, the weaker shielded ship would be completely destroyed. Both shields being comparable in strength might have dropped the ship slow enough to create the type of explosion that we saw and damage to the rest of the fleet of the First Order. Now, why all the ships of the First Order lined up behind each other to get this devastation, we'll never know. This would be the same for Starkiller Base. Now, I know that the Millennium Falcon was able to travel through the shields while going into hyperspace and coming out just below light speed. One explanation is actually that the shields would take anything moving faster than the speed of light and slow it down to stop a collision from actually happening without destroying the vessel. This would mean that Han Solo's maneuver to pull up at the last minute was only due to the fact that the shields dropped him out of hyperspace, however it was closer than he expected to the surface of the planet. If this explanation made the Holdo maneuver actually make sense to you, please give me a like below and subscribe to see the next explanations I come up with for the rest of the issues I found in the movie. Be well, and may the Force be with you, always.